Tonight, we want to talk about a dungeon to die for. I think every dungeon master at some point in their career has designed a dungeon that seemed to just fall flat. There was something about it that just didn't have any spice, any bite, and even though it felt like when we made it, when we spent all those hours that I'm sure you were spending preparing for your session, we thought it was going to be good, but it just didn't come out right. And so tonight we're going to talk about tools and tricks that we can use to make our dungeons something memorable, something engaging, and of course, something to die for. So, let's master the game. Instagram, please come on over to YouTube, hang out with us, and spend time learning with us. If you want to see the down cam, that's where it's at. All right. So when we're talking about a dungeon to die for, there's 5 things that I think we all need to know. Hey, Tavern Banter, welcome back. The 5 things that I feel we need to know. And of course, that means it's essential, right? That there are tools that we can use to use on our players. These are the tools at our disposal as the dungeon master to create this to die for dungeon. We have, of course, monsters, NPCs, weather, the terrain, and planned encounters. And that can be, we'll talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So these 5 things are what we as dungeon masters have at our disposal to help our players create great experiences. Because at the end of the day, it's not just us. We're just the rest of the world. Our players, they are the protagonists. And it's through them that the story is written with them, right? If we just create a world and say, hey, you're just living in my world, you should probably be writing a book instead of being a game master or a dungeon master, because you have a great story to tell and we all want to hear it. But if you're not willing to incorporate the other 4 or 5 or 6 stories at the table to your story, you've missed the point of this storytelling game. It's a communal storytelling game. As much as it says greatest role-playing game on the cover of, the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook, this is at its base a communal storytelling game. And if we're not willing to incorporate them, you missed the point. But we have some tools that are specifically ours. They don't belong to the players in any way. These are what we can use and manipulate and change to affect that story, right? And affect the players and antagonize the players so that we create that engaging and fun experience. So, if you haven't already, hey, Scruffer's dead. Hey, I appreciate that. Thank you. If you haven't, come on over to YouTube so that we can participate in the chat together, because I've asked the pre-stream question in the chat was, where should we make our example dungeon tonight? So if you have an idea, feel free to drop it in the chat. Let me know in some way, shape, or form, because as we go on, we'll talk and we'll actually build a dungeon together so that you can see the process that I go through when I am designing a dungeon. So let's break down these 5 tools that we have. If you've watched, I have a video that talks about the 3 types of encounters, right? There are combat encounters, there are roleplay encounters, and there are utility encounters. And these 3 things are the moments that we create, that we antagonize our players with as they are living their protagonist lives. It's what we have at our disposal. And of course, monsters, that is generally going to create, that's the source of our combat encounters. Our NPCs are largely the source of our roleplay encounters. Weather and terrain, these are the source of utility encounters. And a utility encounter, for anyone that hasn't watched any of my videos before, a utility encounter is a problem. A problem that we present the players so that they have to get off of the paper, right? They have to put the paper down. They have to think a little bit more generally and start thinking about their bonds, ideals, personality traits, their flaws, and then we apply those to the problem. Oh, well, the example that I love to use, the impassable canyon. How do we get across this canyon? The bridge is broken. Oh no, what do we do? Right? The bridge is broken. How do we get across this canyon? What do we do? And it presents your players the opportunity to roleplay with each other. Okay? That roleplay with each other is important. It's so important because I've had a lot of people this last week. I dropped a couple of reels on Instagram specifically about roleplay and how roleplay can be affected by bad players, how we can be better at roleplay, so on and so forth. But the utility encounter is a great opportunity for your players to roleplay with each other. And those are the moments where you as a dungeon master are just sitting there on the other side of your screen and enjoying the show. And it's glorious. It's glorious. It's one of the best things about being a dungeon master or a game master, is watching the moment that your players take the story and immerse themselves in their character in that story and solve the problem as their character. They let go of meta knowledge, they let go of their college degrees, and they just think about what Garn Skullcrusher would do in this situation. And the things that happen are absolutely fabulous. And that is where your engagement and your investment in your dungeons is going to come from, is these utility encounters. We always think of, oh yeah, the role play that gets us to the dungeon, and oh yeah, the monster that we have to fight in the dungeon. Those are all well and good. It's the utility encounters. The utility encounters are what genuinely create investment. Now, I saw in the chat, Tavern Banter, Snowtopped Mountain. Oh, so this is for the setting. I like it. The slopes and treacherous, steep, but deep within is a temple rumored to be a legendary blank. Excellent. That could be good. Ooh, we might work with that. I like that. Because it's so diverse, we can do whatever we want with it. All right, encounters. And the encounter, your planned encounter, can be any and all of them. It can be any one of these. A combat encounter. It can be a combat and a role play. It can be a role play and a utility. The options are endless. And it's just something. This is what we plan. And these are things that we can toss in. Okay? So now, let's talk about the actual physical aspects of the dungeon. Okay? Because I think that's what a lot of our dungeons are lacking. So this is kind of the content. Ooh, yes, the what do we put in it? Oh yes, we need an impassable cavern and a wandering merchant. It makes me think of every roguelike video game you've ever played, where you're 10 levels in and you encounter this merchant and you're like, dude, what do you even, this doesn't work. What are you doing here? This doesn't make any sense. That's not to say you can't have one. It could be a goblin. Ooh, like a little goblin shop, right? A little goblin tinkerer guy with his little lizard, and he's got saddlebags of goods and stuff. Be careful with that, because your players would be liable to just kill them and take their stuff. But, know your group. That's all I'm saying. Know your group. Okay. So now, talking about the actual physical characteristics of our dungeon, right? The thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is how big and how small dungeons need to be. And I think we're cutting ourselves, we're holding ourselves short. We're cutting ourselves short if we don't incorporate that in our dungeon, in our setting. So, for instance, this all kind of falls into the terrain aspect here. Anyone who's ever actually been in a cave, like, okay, yeah, I can think of some like wind caves that are actually seemingly quite large, but how about ones that have been created by water? Some of these caves and some of these, the one that immediately comes to mind, I'm from Arizona, and so the one that immediately comes to mind is Kartchner Caverns. You can look it up online. It's actually a very, very popular cave system. But Kartchner Caverns, there are places there where you've got to squeeze your body into these places, and if you're over a certain size, you're going to have a difficult time even getting into the cave system, because the entrance into the cave system is literally like a 1 foot by 2 foot space, and you've got to like get down on your belly and squeeze under there, and then you're into cave systems, right? But think about your big hulking dragonborn character and his plate armor and his great axe. And there is no way that character is going to have a good time in the 3 foot or 2 foot wide crevices that you have to get through, that these goblins or these kobolds are living inside of this dungeon. It's something to think about, right? There's no reason that we can't use that terrain to create difficult terrain for our players. Now, of course, we have to recall, like, even though, oh yeah, the dungeon is, the entrance is 5 feet wide and you're in this 5 foot tunnel or whatever, right? Rather than calling it difficult terrain, there are other ways that we can actually create problems, create utility encounters, or create utility problems to the combat encounter. So say you've got player X and they encounter monster Y. And the problem is player A and B and C are there in marching order. Okay? So they're all there. The problem here is X is wedged into combat. I cannot back up. I can't move forward. I have to stay here. And so you guys figure out whatever you're going to do to help me, but I literally cannot. I can't move forward without fighting this thing. You guys can't move past me. And so rather than, having movement or restricting their rolls or something like that, you can just say, hey, you're stuck in your marching order because the area is too narrow. And that creates an all new problem, right? Because now your players B and C have to find ways, well, what can I do? What can I do? How can I support the combat even though your tank is in the back? Or if it's, kind of windy sort of thing and it breaks line of sight, now your cleric back here can't see your tank up here and he can't cast his spells because he can't see anymore. And so you have just created a problem that our players are going to have to overcome and work together to overcome, all just because you took 1 second to actually think about your terrain and actually think about what your players or what the characters would be facing in this terrain. And then on the flip side, so let's talk about the flip side. This was tight and narrow, right? Problems, okay? Stop fighting in wide open spaces. Having, like, it's the Mines of Moria, right? Think about the grandness of the Mines of Moria. It makes me think about Tavern Brawler's comment. There's a temple deep within the mountain, right? It's very, kind of gives me Moria vibes. But this space is absolutely huge, and it's representative of the dwarven pride or whatever, right? You know, oh yes, they dug too deep, they made these grand halls, it's all well and good, think of the freaking heating bill, whatever. But these grand open spaces and the pillars that are around them and everything like that. But that's a boring setting to fight in. Does any fighting actually happen in the grand open spaces? No. No actual fighting. So think about Lord of the Rings. Think about the movie, Fellowship of the Ring. They're running through the mines, and they're in these wide open spaces. No actual fighting ever takes place in the wide open room. At all, ever. Because it's boring. The fight, the fight where they bring, it's a troll, they've got a troll, and they try to close the gates, and fool of a took, and he dumps the thing down the well, and it drums in the deep, and all the things, it progresses. That takes place in an engaging setting. Think about how there's kind of the mezzanine. There's like a platform raised around the room that has pillars that can't be seen around, so that Frodo has like places to hide, right? There's the well in the middle of the room. Like that is an engaging space for no reason, right? Why is there this raised platform mezzanine that people can walk up on? It's for no other reason than the cinematic capability of having, Frodo eye to eye with the troll. Like, that's literally it. So that's the only reason that this could feasibly exist. It's just a decorative piece. But from a Dungeons and Dragons perspective, from a roleplay perspective, from creating an engaging dungeon perspective, this is creating platforms. It's changing it's taking our world from 2D to 3D, right? No longer are your players just looking at a grid on a map and saying, well, I guess I'll move here, because movement then no longer matters. Remember, in 5th edition, your players are able to break up their movement. They can move 10 feet and attack and then move 20 feet. The entire point of that is so that you can use terrain. Oh, I'm gonna run from hiding, I'm going to do my attack, and then I'm going to go hide behind something so I can get cover, right? That's the whole point there. And we don't do it because there's never things to give us cover, right? There's never a raised platform to give your ranged fighter protection. There's not a falling hazard in the middle of the floor. These are all things that we can do to add spice to that moment specifically. And that, once again, all boils down to our terrain. Stop fighting in empty open rooms. It's boring. Oh, it's so boring. And I've done it. I've done it too many times when I was just being a lazy dungeon master, and I just put them in the middle of an open space because, well, the space was just open. Like it makes sense for it to just be an open space. It's okay for you to move the combat. Remember that a lot of your creatures, your beings, the things that you're fighting, they have the capability. Oh, a funeral choir. Ooh, that's good. Scruffers, that's awesome. Good idea. That's exactly what that's actually probably exactly what that was. Just a viewing platform, because there was like the tomb in the center there. Yeah. But the entire, your monsters have some level of intelligence, right? At the very least, they have, most of them have some form of self-preservation. They understand that, oh, I'm being hurt. This is not a good place. I'm going to leave now. Thank you. Have a nice day. And they're going to freaking peace out. And they're done. Okay? Yeah, monsters take cover too. Exactly, Brad. They think about watching a cat or a lion or a tiger. I'm talking like a cat, a predator. They use cover. They're smart and intelligent about how they're going about the attack here. And so think of your players in this setting, the tombs in the Mines of Moria here, and think about something like a Displacer Beast, something that not only is intelligent but has illusory capabilities and is able to, hide itself very well. Think of its use of this platform here and being able to jump down onto prey. Think of the ambushing capabilities. Don't just have your players walk into a room and have your bad guy on the other side of the room. Whoa, thank you. I've been waiting for your arrival. No, it's okay to ambush your players, right? And then as your players are meeting their demise, that's when the big bad evil guy will stand there and he'll monologue and he'll glory in his victory. And that's like provides the opportunity for your players to do something else. So Scruffers on Instagram asks, is that a legit question to ask the DM? Can you lay out the terrain? 100%. 100%, especially for Theater of the Mind players. I love the Theater of the Mind. But in the mathematics of 5th edition Magic, right? When you need to know what 60 feet is, when I need to know the 20-foot diameter, the grid matters. Okay, it's as much as some people hate the grid matters in 5th edition. So if you're using an older edition like AD&D or something like that, 2nd edition, where it's a lot of Theater of the Mind, it's totally okay to ask your dungeon master, hey, what am I looking at here? What does my character see? Because we as dungeon masters don't always do the best job of explaining it. As much as we might sweat it and think about it and be like, okay, yeah, there's like a pile of rocks in the corner that has like a little bundle of coins in it. Like, okay, cool. Like we thought about all these things. And then when it gets down to the moment and your players are like, oh, I shoot an arrow at the whatever. And like, next thing you know, combat's swinging and you missed a key piece of the terrain. You missed a key piece of something that your players could be using to help them solve the utility or the combat. And that's why I always recommend, at the very least, on top of whatever you put on a grid, you need to describe 2 things that your players perceive, physically perceive. Oh yeah, you can see, oh that's great, this is what we see. Okay, I want to know what I feel. What is the temperature of the room? I want to know what I smell, what I hear, what are the sounds. And as you describe that, you make this space so much more real to your players. And that's when role play can begin to happen, because now they can sense, oh yeah, you can feel the heat from the sconce on the wall as the torch begins to burn low. And had you not described that little bit, that little tidbit, your player would have never had the thought, oh, I'm going to grab the torch off the wall and I'm going to wave this torch at the bad guy, at the spider as it approaches, because you hadn't described it to them. So 2 things that they can physically perceive and 1 thing that they mentally insight about the scene, right? This is the vibe, the mood of the room. You can feel, as your hackles, you start to goosebump as the hair on the backs of your arms begins to stand on end, and you don't know why. That is a very real thing that we as humans feel. And the moment you describe that to the humans at your table, they know exactly what their character is feeling. And they go, oh, bad situation. Ding, ding, ding. And you painted that for them through that simple bit of insight. That's naturally evolved into humanity. And it makes sense that it's naturally evolved into the characters of Dungeons and Dragons. So just give that to people. Don't make them roll insight. No, just, hey man, the vibe of the room, super precarious. You can tell that the behaviors of the people around you at this ball that you're at. Everyone's smiling and happy and everything, but you can tell that, like, just based off of the angle of the pistols in people's belts, that if something pops off, it's going to pop off fast, right? And so it's natural. People feel it. That's the sixth sense. You can perceive that about people. Things I know on YouTube says I especially love elevation included. You got to choose who's shooting arrows at the goblin on the bridge and who's charging up the valley to smack the troll. Right. To go actually to this exact setting that we were just talking about, we get a really great terrain utility encounter for our players, the Fellowship, as they are running down the stairs in the lava and the big cavern and everything. And the stairs are absolute crap as the world's shaking around them and the stairs are falling apart. And now they have to jump this expanse in the stairs. Okay, well, all right. A couple of the humans make the jump, no problem and stuff. And then they start taking fire from orcs and goblins up on the, wherever. It doesn't matter. They're just far away. And so now Legolas has to provide return fire as people are dodging arrows and chucking the little ones across and stuff. And Boromir's taking two at a time and just going for it. That is a fun interplayer roleplay opportunity as they're faced with a problem in the middle of, kind of a super soft combat encounter in the middle of a utility encounter. There's roleplay between the players as they're like, okay, don't throw me. Like, don't you dare toss me, sort of thing that gets tossed in the next movie. That's great. But it's a perfect example of the utility encounter. And it's something that we see in cinema because it's fun and it's engaging, right? We were entertained in that scene. And we can emulate that in our dungeons. And I encourage you to try as much as possible. Brad, I love when I had to bust out, when you've got to bust out the Pythagorean's theorem, right? A squared plus B squared equals C squared, just to see if your Misty Step can reach, sort of thing. It's fun. So as much as we might trash the grid and, it removes the oh my goodness, brain fart. It removes how engaged we are in the story. Oh, the words there. You guys, I'm sure everybody watching is just like, oh, it's this word. Oh, man. Good heavens. No, it's not going to come to me. But it removes that. It removes the player out of the character. Good heavens, whatever this word is. Okay, whatever. I'm moving on now. I've embarrassed myself. The theater, sure, yeah, Hans, that's good. It takes us out of the theater. It takes us out of the moment, right? We're no longer our character. We're us sitting around with Cheeto fingers and a Dr. Pepper, right? It's we're no longer our characters in that moment when we have to bust out the calculator and Pythagorean theorem. Okay, whatever, that's good, but it's still fun when we have to do that to our spells. Scruffer, would you briefly explain what a utility encounter might encompass? So Scruffer, whenever I refer to a utility encounter, it is anything that is a problem to be solved. This could be a puzzle. Puzzles are great utility encounters, right? It could be, a tree has fallen across the road, and you have to you have to get your wagon across somehow, and your barbarian's like, well, I'll just take my axe and I'll hack it to pieces. Okay, well, that'll delay you by an hour, and you might miss whatever your thing is. The suspension of disbelief. Thank you, Scruffers. So it's anything that is a problem for our players that takes them out of the role and makes them think for a moment on how they would actually solve the problem with their character. Not their stats. As you look at your stats, you're like, oh, well, I've got a +5 to strength, so maybe we'll just do this. No, like thinking about it's an opportunity to use your ability scores or to use your kits as you present the problem. Hey, you have to get into this party and you don't have an invitation. How are you going to get in? And the rogue is immediately like, oh, I'll stealth in. And the bard is like, well, I have a forgery kit and calligraphy tools and stuff, so like I'll just make us an invitation. And so it's an opportunity for your players to talk to each other. The rogue talking to the bard and finding ways to, oh, well, we don't know what an invitation looks like. So then the rogue has a mini side quest and, all right, make a stealth check to break in somewhere and steal an invitation for the bard so that he can copy the invitation and then put it back, sort of thing. And it's just a small, it doesn't have to be huge. You know, we're talking a couple minutes to 30-minute encounter where our players have to solve a problem. Use their utilities, use the tools at their disposal, their ability scores, namely, to solve a problem. And so that is what I refer to as a utility encounter. And I love to add utility encounters to roleplay and combat because that really spices it up, especially with terrain here. Any of you that have watched my 5-room dungeon videos know that I love in the climactic room, the 4th room, you need to have a power for the bad guy. You need to have a parlay for them to say, and the place matters. You need to have something interesting going on in the environment. So, and then of course, man, I have just been chitty chat tonight. We are low on time. When we are actually thinking about what we are going to design, the W's come in handy. The who, the what. Skip the when, go to where, the why, and then the how is our players, right? This is our players' input. That's the player input. Whatever they are going to do to solve the situation or enter the dungeon or get around the problem, that is the player input. That is variables that we cannot control. That's okay. What we are controlling is the who. So let's go to I liked the ice cave that I think Tavern Banter came up, the ice temple. And so the first thing that came to my mind was some sort of whites, something that, you know, kind of ice related to the cold, the petrify or the paralyze factor could be cool. So encounter the whites in what? In what is this? It's an old temple that, once upon a time, these mountains were quite temperate, but have been befallen by like this eternal blizzard that happened after, you know, this god was killed. And so it's kind of this fallen temple. And all of the wights and ghouls in this fallen temple are the old priests and priestesses that used to man this temple and now serve this dead god. And as they serve this dead god, the cold just kind of seeped into them. And now there are these walking ice corpses. Super fun, right? Whales. John, you're typing weird. I'm not understanding. The where. This is the actual descriptor, right? So this is coming up with the map itself, the map proper. Anyone on Instagram that wants to see what I'm writing on the down cam, please come over to YouTube so you can actually see what I'm writing. I'm so sorry I don't have more cameras to down screen and everything, and Instagram doesn't play well with other people, so it doesn't work very well. And then the why. This is the hook. This is the secret that we used to get our players to this location. It could be the MacGuffin, if you will. The MacGuffin, right? This is the why. There's something there, the legendary X. The legendary X that Tavern Banter mentioned. The legendary orb, or this old artifact of this fallen god, right? Or even better, the god actually died at this location, and so there's this petrified corpse of this god that these priests and priestesses just kind of withered away while they worshipped, as this temple just froze to ice around them. And so that could be a super fun, like you have to retrieve a super fun side quest. Like, why are they even here? Oh, for a specific ritual for this local wizard, oh, you need, the heart of a god or something like that. Who knows? I don't know, whatever. It's your story. Make it what you want it to be. And so this god is there, their petrified corpse, still with the necrotic blade that killed them, still stuck in their chest because no one was willing to touch the evil of this blade. And that's just a fun who, what, when, where, why, the W's of the situation that goes into that. And once we kind of have that idea, okay, well, it looks like our combat encounter is going to be a wight. And the role play here, a role play encounter, well, that's whoever's going to give us the secret. It could be the wizard in town. It says, oh, there's story of a fallen god, and I need something, an artifact there or whatever. The weather, the blizzard, right? So traveling through the blizzard to get to this temple, through the mountains. I am Indiana Jones. Exactly, right? This is freaking Indiana Jones is another great example if you want all of this content, how to make engaging dungeons. Because it doesn't have to just be a dungeon. It could be engaging encounters. This could be creating a fun ball experience. Oh, okay, so how do we do that? Oh, what combat will they face? What role play will they face? How can we make the terrain engaging? Ooh, a thought, something to think about. And so for instance, the terrain, I think Tavern Banter mentioned icicles. I don't know how to spell icicles. Hopefully that's correct. We don't have icicles here. Brad says the blizzard has created problems for weather patterns farther away. Ooh, awesome. That's actually a fun economic reason, right? Ever since the god died up on the mountain, and the storms have stolen all of the rains, and our crops are dying, and so on and so forth, whatever sob story you want to give your players. But it's a reason for them to go. That's the hook. That's the MacGuffin. Why are we doing what we're doing for this dungeon? What are we doing? Give them a reason. It should be a reason that is far-reaching. And maybe they go and they're like, oh, maybe they don't have all the answers. Maybe they don't really know, like, oh, why is there a blizzard just permanently sitting on top of this mountaintop? And they are sent to research it. And then they realize, like, oh, like, I'm pretty sure that's a god, right? As this corpse is just laying there in this chair. You've gotten done fighting all these wights and these ghouls in these priestly robes. And you roll up and you're like, oh, apparently bigger problems have happened here. And someone makes a good religion check and you realize that blade belonged to a certain other nefarious individual. And then you're kicked off into a greater plot and a greater campaign. And awesome. It was a fun first session to jumpstart that story. I blessed the rain cloud in the frozen temple. I blessed the rains down in the frozen temple. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you hanging out with me. I'm going to go ahead and start the wrap up. As always, please like and subscribe and follow and all the good stuff. If you haven't on YouTube, I see you. All 8 of you, only 5 of you have liked. Please come on over to YouTube. We're trying to jumpstart the YouTube channel and really get things moving here. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you hanging out with me. We will do the post credits as always if we have any additional questions. But until then, make sure that you're having fun. And as always, take care of your players. All right. Once again, we're back for the post credits. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? Feel free to ask anything. I'm more than willing to help with anything you've got. And if you don't have a question now, but you have a question later, feel free to contact me on YouTube, on Instagram, however you can get a hold of me. And I'm generally active enough that I'll actually answer stuff. So, there we go. thank you, Things I Know. Another fun session. Maybe the party's not the appropriate level. That is always a really fun problem for our players to face, right? And I would say make sure that when you do that, when you present, let's say, a party of level 5s with something that a party of level 10s should maybe think about running from, make sure that your players know. Make sure that your players know that it's okay to run. And the easiest way to do that is to have a sacrificial lamb. You can always have an NPC that you just nuke, right? You can just nuke an NPC and let the players realize, like, oh, hey, like that NPC was stronger than us and he just got totally demolished, right? Totally acceptable. It's okay to let your players know, hey, you should not be dealing with this right now. This is just a plot point. Please don't fight the god, okay? The god has just shown up to give you a MacGuffin, to give you a quest. Like, don't fight the god. It's okay. And you can tell your players that, like, out of character, you know, whatever you do for your out of character symbology or whatever, as the dungeon master, let your players know, hey, just so you know, you have all fallen unconscious, and I'm going to go cinematic mode, right? Or the end here is inevitable. I'm going to go cinematic mode. And let your players know that you'll never just kill them outright in cinematic mode, right? Because what you've done is you've taken the agency away from the players, and that is a huge problem, right? The moment you take agency away from the players is the moment they are no longer having a fun time, because it's no longer their character. It's just your character, and you're writing a story, right? Going back to the very beginning of this video, if you're just here to write a story, go write a book. We would love to hear your book. This is a communal storytelling game. And the moment you essentially say, hey, I'm going to turn you off for a minute and let me just tell the story, do it sparingly. Do it sparingly, but it's okay if it's what you need to do to get them through a moment without them doing stupid things, right? If you've just kind of written yourself into kind of a corner and they have to encounter a god, or they're overcome by a greater power, and you know that if you don't go cinematic mode, someone is going to go Last Samurai, you know, surrounded by the villains and just go down fighting, right? Take that moment away. It's okay. And let them know, hey, I'm not going to kill anybody, but we're going to progress with the story here. Buckle up for just a minute. Give me 5 minutes, and then go cinematic, and you just kind of talk them through what happens. Things I Know. How do you generally deal with a party of mixed levels? Dealing damage a more experienced player could handle without ganking a low-level player. I don't. Actually, as a matter of fact, I don't. The most level disparity I have ever allowed in a game is 1 level. And that's it. Okay, I've done a little bit more, but that was for like a guest player, because stories interwove for a minute. A player had a character on like a different plane of existence, and like people jumped to that plane and like they had a minute sort of thing. But that was like a 4-level difference, and that player acted more as a guide than anything to kind of get them through this plane of existence and get them back to where they were supposed to be. And so in general, I don't do, like, it's cool that you've got your character or whatever from your story. Keep it there. Keep it in that campaign. It's okay. We'll just make you a new character. D&D Beyond lets you do it fast. There's apps that you can do it on. Heck, I could give you pen and paper and we could have a character in 15 minutes. Like, it's really not hard to just make a new character. And so I would say that if you've got someone dropping in or whatever to a campaign setting, just make them the same level. It's easy. It's not hard to do. And it saves you, the dungeon master, the anxiety of, oops, I killed the 3rd level guy, even though like they're fighting 5th level things, right? Or, the 7th level thing is killing all these 5th level bad guys. when the rest of the party is 5th level. You balanced it for the lower level guys, but this friggin' 7th or 9th level thing is just like stomping on your baddies. It just creates balance problems, and 5th edition is hard enough. Excuse me. 5th edition is hard enough to keep balanced. So I would say don't sweat it. Just make them all the same level. All right, you guys. Looks like we're running low on questions. I hope you all have a good rest of your evening. Have a happy Thanksgiving. And we will see you next week when we talk about items. Items, maybe a little bit about feats, but how to make items that don't suck. So hopefully we'll see you next week, and have a good night.